It is the Manchester derby. It is first against second. As you can see at the top of the table, mind, there's 14 points between them. It's a lead that looks unassailable given the form that City are in. But Nedum, any reason to think that your old team can't beat United?
Oh, well, I like the way you framed the question. Of course they can beat United, but the fact of the matter is it's the Manchester derby. I think if we only look back to last season, I think United beat City 3 times. So they need to have that level of confidence going into the game if they're to have a chance, because otherwise, if you, as the thing is to say about the Yankees, if you get lost just looking at the pinstripes, then ultimately I think it'll be a long day for you.
Ian, we're coming up against a team with obviously a great winning run and a team with a brilliant away streak. So how do you see this one playing out?
Well, I think there's no logical way to tip against Manchester City the way they're playing. They're like a machine at the moment. Stones and Diaz at the back are playing. Well, they're impregnable when those two are together. Stones was rested in midweek. He'll be back. Gundogan will be back in midweek. But, you know, it was a 0-0 draw earlier in the season, and it was about as interesting as watching, listening to the shipping forecast. It was that bad a game. So our first thing is, let's hope this is a better game. United have drawn their last 3 games 0-0. So I think it'll be a bit less of a chess match this time. I think United might go for it a little bit more with the gap at 14 points. At least I hope they will. But I could see United maybe getting a draw, possibly, out of the game.
Well, Craig, when United have got the problems that they have scoring, it's not going to get any easier against this City defence.
No, and you've only got to look at the record recently against the big teams, and it's appalling. And so there's nothing to suggest in their recent form that that's going to change. But as Nedum said, look, they have had success against City. They do play a counter-attacking style, but even that counter-attacking style hasn't really been working for them as well of late. And you're not going to challenge for the Premier League title if you can't get the job done against the other big boys. And that's been a problem for them. Look, we talk about the 0-0, they talk about the game early in the season, and we talk about the chess match. That was a chess match because Manchester City were in a much more vulnerable position at that time, both defensively and in their league position. That's not the case anymore. Even if by some strange turn United were to find some form and win this game, City are still going to win the league. I mean, they're going to have to lose 4 or 5 games. That's almost 50% of their games left to lose this league. And the rest are going to have to win all the way through, or United will. That's not going to happen. So we're not going to see a cautious City like we saw earlier in the season, because they're in a much better position. And so they'll go out and they'll try and put the hammer down, I'd imagine.
Yeah, obviously, as mentioned, there were those previous meetings, that 0-0 that we did see, but this is in all competitions and what we're seeing. In the Premier League alone, though, United have won 2 of the previous 3. They drew that one that we just did mention. How do you think it's going to play out, Shaka?
I'm with you boys here, and I think this quite clearly is City's to lose. I'm trying to find a way, other than giving Manchester United a puncher's chance, as to how they get the better of Manchester City. And in all honesty, given what you saw, even in that dour 0-0 that you saw back in December, I think it was, I think what you saw from City is their approach, not just against United, but going forward, that they were prepared to sit deep and take the counter-attacking threat that Manchester United had. What you saw in the following game in the Cup is a front 3 that sat in between United's midfield and defence, and were just kind of relentless in how they attacked Manchester United. And they were by far the better of the 2, and some will point to the 2 goals coming from set pieces. But it's a game that Manchester City, for me, dominated, deservedly won. Took away Manchester United's counter-attacking threat, and as a result, nullified them for the most part. That's how you see things playing out again this time.
Look, Kate, go on. So, no, I was just going to say, look, we can look at graphics and we can look at, score lines, and we can look at the 0 goals for Man United, but that doesn't tell the story. The story is, not only have the results recently not been good enough, but the football's not been very slick or impressive either. So you have a double barrel problem here. Is one, you haven't been scoring, and 2, you haven't been playing particularly good football and looking as attacking as you were maybe, say, in November and December. Contrast that to Manchester City, and no matter who comes in the side, there's a plan. And there's a plan about the way they do it, and there's a rotation in the midfield to front. There is a threat from the middle of the park. And this has all really been done for pretty much most of the season without a natural striker. So let's be quite frank about this. Manchester City, and it's possible, Manchester City will have to have a bad day at the office if they're going to lose this game.
Is that good enough, though, Nedum, that it has to be a bad day at the office for City when you're a team the size of United?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But then, as I say, game's a bit different because of the fact it's a derby. But to jump on the back of something you said, Craig, it's interesting because I think attacking-wise, maybe they did look better in October, November, December time for United. But when we look at the teams that they put out, I wouldn't say Solskjaer's going with a defensive lineup. So I'd like to know what you think has changed, because I think with Ole himself, I think he actually said in some of those big games, like against Chelsea, although it was a bad game, United did try and have a high press. Do you think they're better off as a team who just drop off and try and hit on the counter-attack because they don't have anything in terms of just an attacking threat in general play? Or do you think they should carry on doing what they're doing and trying to press high?
I think one of the things is that that they had a successful counter-attacking option for a while, but they didn't have a plan B. And that was a problem for them, particularly against, at that point, some of the so-called smaller teams who sat in. And they at one point looked more threatening against the bigger teams because they didn't bother about possession as much, and then they used the pace of Martial and Rashford and the likes in behind. I think that threat is somewhat gone, and they don't have a slick rotational forward movement in transition like Manchester City. It's just, and Liverpool have got that issue as well a little bit at the moment, is where we're not seeing, and the reason for theirs, I think, is more personnel, because we know about their injury problems and some players have lost form. But they're not transitioning like the team they once were either, and that's been a problem for them. I think United have lost a bit of that spark as well going forward. They haven't dominated teams. They haven't passed it as well. I think Bruno Fernandes has been snuffed out a little bit more recently. And when that's happened and they've had to look to go somewhere else, they haven't had another great option. Even though they'll say, well, we've got some attacking players here, we've got him to come in, we've got Cavani to come back in, got Van de Beek on the bench, doesn't get used much. You look at Guardiola, when he rotates, Gundogan was out with a small injury for a while. Someone else comes in and fills that role, fills that goal-scoring void. Foden goes in the team, he comes out the team. De Bruyne is out for a few weeks. They bring people in, they rotate, but they generally get the same performance. I think for United, it's crystal clear. If they're not getting the ball into Fernandes, if Rashford's off form at all, it's not happening for them.
That's a key thing, I think. Yeah. That's a key thing, Craig. Bruno Fernandes, you said he's been snuffed out of a couple of games lately. I think he's tired. He's played a lot of games. They rely on him a lot. And he's vital in this game. They need him to come back to life. Of course, City will have their plans for him. But if he's working his magic, to use a tired old word, but if he is, Manchester United could be in business in this game, I think. Do you know the other thing I haven't liked about Fernandes, apart from his performances, the other thing I haven't liked about Fernandes from about 4 to 6 weeks ago, and we touched on it on the show, was clearly, as a player with his talent, he's now a marked man in the Premier League. Welcome to the playmakers in the Premier League. You're marked out every week. And the one thing that I noticed with him, and we discussed it, was a couple of times, I can't remember the players, but they put kind of heavy challenges in on him early in games. And he was complaining to the referee straight away. He didn't like it. And I think in some sense, he's starting to get put off his game a little bit more by people coming in and leaving a couple of late challenges on him. Not enough to get red cards or bookings, but enough to annoy him. And I think in some sense, his mind's been turned by that. And I think they're really great players, particularly in the Premier League in England over the years. They've dealt with that the best. They've accepted that they're going to be targeted by guys who want to stop them. And they've generally got on with it. I noticed a few weeks ago, Bruno Fernandes was starting to complain. And I think that's had an adverse effect on his performances. So,
Craig, if you stop Fernandes, do you stop United?
Well, it's not as simple as that, Kay, but it certainly it nullifies a huge threat from them because his passing range is so good. And his eye for an early pass is so good. But I personally don't, and maybe Nedum and the other guys at No City will have an opinion on this. I don't think Guardiola will be overly concerned about. I mean, he'll be thinking about them, but I think City will want to. They know they've got Rodri or Fernandinho, whoever it is, can come in and do a great job. But I think they'll be trying to put on United what City are all about. And if United don't have the ball particularly much in the game, there's not a great deal Bruno Fernandes can do.
Do you agree with that, Nedum?
Yes and no. I think recently I've heard Pep say a lot that they focus on one game at a time. And one thing in which they do there, they see what the opposition's strengths are and they try and stop them. And I think in recent games, when you've seen them play against Wolves, when you see them play against Spurs, with the Spurs counter-attack and the Wolves counter-attack, they spent a lot of time swarming the ball play, whoever had the ball whenever there was a quick turnover. And it made it very difficult for them to sort of start really good sort of progressive attacks. And that isn't necessarily something that they did in other games, essentially, because the strength might exist elsewhere. And I think with Manchester United, if Fernandes is the main playmaker and United maybe refuse to go through anybody else but him, then I think Pep will notice that and we might see a tactical change going into the weekend. But then I also think he's very aware of other potential match winners for United. But at the moment, you are looking at Fernandes and maybe he doesn't like being kicked and so on. But then in the same breath, he could also be disappointed because as far as pulling weight goes, he's been the main man for United this season. I think Rashford has chipped in with quite a few goals. But then after that, you're looking around and you're wondering, what more can he do in this instance? And, for me, being someone who's essentially blue, the more frustrated he is, I think the better it is for City. So long may that continue.
Shaka, Ole says he doesn't buy the out-of-form narrative for his side. Whose fault is it that at second place, they're 14 points behind the leaders? Is it his or is it his team's?
Well, it's a share of the spoils. Listen, Manchester City are just so much better than everybody else. You accept that lead for what it is. And United were playing catch-up on everybody else. They've seem to have done that, only City in their sides now. So you take that for what it is. But on the one hand, you have Ole talking about or criticising the critique of them being low in form and low in confidence, given the last 3 0-0s, which if you're sitting in that dressing room or you're a Manchester United supporter, you look at those 3 and say, well, okay, we had already beat Sociedad 4-0 in the first leg, so no harm done there in just shutting up shop. You play out a 0-0 against Chelsea, who've only conceded 2 since Tommy Tuchel took over. And the one real disappointment is Crystal Palace, which was an awful game in all honesty. But if you look further back than that, ever since United beat Liverpool, they've only beat Southampton 9-0, which you mentioned, Sociedad, Newcastle 3-1, and they beat West Ham in the cup after extra time. That's not good enough for a Manchester United team who needs to maintain that kind of form if they are to stay second in the table. They're not going to catch City, but they have to at least stave off the challenges of those coming behind. And right now, United have a lot of issues, regardless of how Ole tries to spin this to his dressing room.
But Craig, Ed Woodward said this week that the progress is clear under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Well, quite frankly, he hasn't got a clue about what's happening on the football field. Let's be straight about that. Look, all of a sudden, the rhetoric from Old Trafford and some of the protagonists is second's good. 2 or 3 months ago, it was top of the league, and this is great, and Fernandes, and we're doing this, and this manager's great. Now, all of a sudden, it's changed. It's but nobody was expecting this. I mean, what utter nonsense. I mean, Manchester United, having spent what they've spent, and Solskjaer been in there for the time being, he's been in there, with City starting the season the way they started, and playing without a striker, second is not good enough for Man United. I mean, let's be frank about it. They're pretty much only second because Liverpool's season has imploded for obvious reasons through personnel. Chelsea sacked their manager, and little old Leicester City are up there with a load of injuries. So I can't get my head around this. Oh, second's okay. Well, your neighbours across the city are streaking away 14 points. My views on this have not changed for 2 years. Yes, there needs to be some personnel changes. Of course, there does. But I think there has to be coaching changes as well at Manchester United. And I think whilst they keep the current regime, there'll always be an afterthought to Liverpool and Man City and maybe even Chelsea when Tuchel gets his feet under the carpet. And that's a decision that they have to make. But if Ed Woodward's saying there's progress, he's watching something different to what I'm watching.
And you wonder, Ian, just how defining March could be for Manchester United. These are their upcoming fixtures, obviously the big one at the weekend. Then they've got those 2 games against Milan in the Europa League. They've got West Ham coming up and Leicester City as well. That's not an easy run, and it definitely could ask some questions of Solskjaer, surely.
Well, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, to be fair to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and to come back at Craig, earlier on in the season, I remember being on this programme and everybody was laughing at the idea that Manchester United would get back into the top 4. Well, they're in second place at the moment, and nobody's going to catch Manchester City because nobody's in the same class as them. So they've gone 20-something games unbeaten away from home. So they're doing something right, Craig. They're not as awful, I think, as you're making out. And I think they held Manchester City to a goalless draw once. Yeah, they're out the Champions League. They win a tough group. The Europa League, big for them. But I still think in this game against Manchester City, you say they're not scoring goals and they're upset about not scoring goals and they've looked a bit punchless lately, but they have kept 3 clean sheets in a row too. And a lot of people have said to you, well, when they played Real Sociedad, oh, that's a difficult time. They could go out there. They thumped them 4-0 away. So they're not awful. I don't think Manchester United, they're not what they used to be under Alex Ferguson, but that, 8-9 years ago now.
Yeah, but do you just accept that? Whilst Liverpool have a struggling coach this year, but a great coach, while City have a great coach and a great side and are not going away, do you just accept that you have a manager who has got no real track record at this level of getting the job done? And by the way, you're painting everybody with that same brush, Darky, because I think I had United in the top 4 at the start of the season, but I certainly didn't have them winning the league. And I go back to the point, at what point is finishing second and third good enough for this? And how many years does that last for? Because Mourinho had them in winning the League Cup, winning the Europa League, second in the league with 81 points. They've been there recently with another manager. How many years does it last just saying, well, City are a good side and we've done what we can, but do you know what? Second or third is going to be acceptable for us. We're talking about Manchester United here, for God's sake.
So that's where they are, Craig, isn't it? Now, that's where they are. That's where everybody, except Manchester City and Liverpool, have been for the last few years. That's what they can do. The best they can do is finish second, and they're second at the moment.
It will be. Well, I think you'll find Chelsea won the league in recent years under Antonio Conte. I think you'll find Leicester City in 2016 won the league under Claudio Ranieri.
You're going a bit further back, Craig. You're going a bit further back.
Nathan, you're going to get the last word on this one. What do you make of what Craig's come back with there? What Ian's come back with.
I think Ian's making a good point, and it's a tricky one. But I would say that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer knows that success for Manchester United is winning leagues and winning titles. That's what I think it is. And whether or not he's going to be the person to do that, I'm not sure. But in some ways, I don't mind it because he's somebody who has that old style Sir Alex Ferguson mentality. And that is what the club, I think, needed at some point. And if you do remove him, who do you bring in that's going to be able to sort of propel Manchester United to the point whereby they get as good as City have been in the last few years or as good as Liverpool have been? Because you look at this squad, you look at the team, and they're a good team. I'd say in this instance, I'd say City are number 1, Chelsea are probably number 2. Then I'd probably say Manchester United are the third best team right now. And I think their failings have come, in my opinion, in the last month or so. Because at one point, when they got to the top of the league, they looked a very good side, in my opinion. But City went on this run, and as a consequence, United haven't been able to match it. And some of that's been due to the fact that whereas City can beat a team 1-0 who's down at the bottom, who's struggling, and just find a way, United have fallen short against a side like Palace. But that's just those games you expect United to win. So I think Ole's I think he's changing the mentality. Maybe the players don't share his mentality just yet, but until you can bring in something that's better, I think he's a good fit for them in this instance.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.